Namaste, and welcome to the fourth step of the Involution program. I'm so excited that you already made it so far, and this last part is going to be kind of a conclusion of everything that we've learned so far about the philosophy and all about the practices in yoga, the yoga asana, the relaxation, the pranayama, the meditation. All these things find a natural conclusion in this part because yoga in the end is about realizing our true self. And we don't need everything or anything from what we've learned so far, but there are tools that can help us to get there. So in some sense, they are not necessary, but they can help us tremendously on our journey, on our path within. So when we do asana, when we do pranayama, when we do meditation, a natural side effect is that we become healthier and happier and just more balanced in life. But the actual aim of these practices is to really get to know ourselves, from these different layers that we've talked about now. And it is there to make us understand that we are not the ego identification, that we are not this voice that is constantly chattering in our head. It's to make us see that we are much more than that, and that our happiness does not depend on this voice and not on the material outside world. And so in this last part, I want to dive a little bit deeper into some more philosophy and the concepts of our true self, and go really into the last two parts of ourselves, into the wisdom body and into the bliss body. So again, we're going to talk about, of course, the five bodies, our panchakoshas, and this time we're going to, as I already mentioned, talk about the wisdom body and the bliss body. We're going to then finally conclude our holistic self and have all these different layers of ourselves together and understand that we are much more than what we previously thought that we were. And so, of course, when we talk about the last step, a big part is going to be Samadhi, the highest goal in yoga, one of the highest goals in yoga, which is mentioned in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, but also in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. So for this last part, or for the continuous yoga practice for all of us, especially the last three of the niyamas are going to be a very important part of our journey. It's the tapas, the discipline, it's the svadhyaya, the self-study, and the ishvara pranidhana, which is probably going to be the most important one, to really surrender. Because letting go of our ego, letting go of what we think we are, requires this deep surrender and this deep trust that there is something more waiting for us just around the corner. So in order to get to know our true self, we need to transcend the ego. We need to see that this tapas, the svadhyaya, and the surrender, this ishvara pranidhana is going to help us to surrender our ego, and that our ego is, of course, there for a reason. But in the end, this is this agent, this part of our mind that is holding us back, and especially going to prevent us to follow this discipline, to have this self-study, and to have the surrender. So it's always going to be important to follow the practices that we've discussed, the asana, the pranayama, the meditation. These are the tools that we have to distance ourselves from this voice within our head. And so after a time of practice and after a time of realizing and observing your inner self, to really get to know yourself on a deep inner level, we will then finally be able to let go of our mind and of all the thought identification in order to then be able to transcend the ego. Does not mean that the ego is not there anymore. It's still, this voice is going to be there, but maybe sometimes it's going to be silent for a while. And generally we will be more able to have a certain distance to it, to understand that we are not this voice, that there is a much deeper layer within us, that we're connected to something a lot larger than what we think we are. And so once we enter this deeper layers of ourselves, we're then able to experience these higher levels of consciousness. That is the name of this last part, and this is actually also the aim of yoga. And by doing this, we will then be able to let go of these 5 afflictions, these 5 kleshas that we talked about in the beginning, in the introduction, the philosophy part of this course. We're going to be able to transcend avidya, to not be ignorant of our true nature anymore. To let go of asmita, this ego identification that we talked about, which is holding its tight grip on us. We're going to be able to let go of all the attachments that our ego has, the raga part, and also the dvesha part, which is then steering us away from these negative states that the ego is trying to prevent us from, always labeling something as good or bad, and then trying to make us not go there, to try to make the outside world in line with what our ego, what this voice in our head wants. And so then ultimately we'll be able to transcend the fear of death, or the fear of ego death. Because in the end we realize that even though this little voice, this ego inside of our head dies, we're not dead, we're still there. There's still this part within us that survives, that is there, and this is who we truly are. This is this pure state of consciousness, the pure being that transcends the ego, the material world, and that is eternal. And then we will finally get into these deep layers of ourselves, to first of all then reach our wisdom body. So the wisdom body we can reach when our mind is finally still and our heart is completely open. When we are in this state, the mind is still, our heart healed and open, we're able to go really deep into our thoughts, into ourselves, because then thoughts stop interfering with this achievement of going deep. Because if we're always distracted, our mind is always following the voice inside of our head, we're not able to go really deep. We're always pulled away into this body consciousness. But we want to go away from this pure physical part and dive deep into the more subtle layers of ourselves. And this is, the wisdom body is this layer that is within us all. It's this all-pervading intelligence that is really much cleverer and much deeper than our ego and our thinking, the mental thinking, can ever be. And when we reach this state, we will actually understand everything that we need to understand, because everything is in this intuitive wisdom. It is our intuition, so to say. And it's not about trying to create something. It's not trying to force ourselves to go there, but it's more like a matter of letting go. It's not being distracted by the thought, just being in a state of being, so to say, having an open heart, not closing ourselves to the experience that naturally unfold. And then with a very natural process, we were able to then dive deeper into this part. So it's a surrender. It's Ishvara Pranidhana, it's a surrendering process. And then this inner wisdom can emerge from within. For example, some very famous musicians, Beethoven, for example, these people were probably able to have access to their deeper selves, to their wisdom body. What they created is nothing that can be produced merely by the human mind. It is something that emerges when you surrender to the divine flow of intelligence, when you surrender to what's really deep inside of you, and it just flows, it emerges. Maybe some of you already had this experience of having a flow state where just something came out of you, a creativity, and you were like, whoa, where is this even coming from? And this is when you tap into your wisdom body. And it's usually accompanied by a very calm mind and an open heart. And then going even one level deeper, we will experience the bliss body. The bliss body is the most hidden part in ourselves. It's the deepest layer, and that cannot easily be reached through just contemplation or meditation. It has to go, or we have to go really deep. after very deep states of meditation, after a very long time of meditation, I'm not talking just like 15, 20 minutes, I'm talking about hours and years of practice, we're really able to go so deep that we understand that this is our true nature. This bliss body is who we truly are. And the experience that we have then goes beyond everything that our normal waking consciousness can understand. When we really tap into our bliss body, we realize that our true nature is, what the name already said, is bliss, love, and joy. This is the true essence of who we are. All the love, all the peace, all the joy that you ever felt in your life nothing doesn't compare to this feeling that we get when we really go into our true nature, into this bliss body, into the deepest part of ourselves. Because this is what we truly are, our pure essence, our true nature, our soul is love and joy and peace. These vibrations of these emotions is our true nature. And so this is actually what we're trying to aim here with yoga, to really go into this deepest layer, because this is then also where the connection to God or to the divine lies. Through this gateway of the bliss body, we're then able to really connect with the deepest and most divine part of ourselves, which in turn is part of the higher divine self. And talking about the divine self within us and the higher divine self, we go basically into the last layers of ourselves, because there are actually 2 more layers here that we haven't talked about in our 5 bodies, so to say. So the 6th sheath, so to say, is our Jivatman. This is the personal, the individual soul, and depicted here as the largest purple or light purple part of ourselves, which is our soul. It's bigger than all the sheath that we have, because this is our deepest or most divine layer, so to say. It's our individual soul. And from this individual soul, we then go to the last layer, to the Paramatman. And the Paramatman is the universal soul. And the Jivatman, of course, is our individual soul, but it belongs to the Paramatman, to the divine soul, to the all-encompassing consciousness. And through these very deep states, we're then able, or in the end, the ultimate goal of yoga, is to merge our Jivatman with the Paramatman. And this realization of that we have a soul, that we are this Jivatman, is basically called Jivan Mukti. It's the awakened soul. And in the awakened soul, which is related to the word moksha, so mukti is related to the word moksha, it means liberation. So we're able to awaken from our karmic incarnation in this life, from all the karma that we accumulated in past lives made us appear in this physical body in this life. And we're able to transcend this and already experience oneness with the divine soul, with Paramatman, while still being alive. This is yoga. This is union. The union of the Jivatman with the Paramatman. Jiva Mukti, yoga, union. And the ultimate goal mentioned here in the Yoga Sutras and the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the Samadhi, this is a very deep state of absorption, of meditation, something that is experienced after years and years of meditation, and so to say the highest goal. There are different stages of Samadhi, but in generally they're all talking about an absorption with the divine. And this really goes deeper than meditation. I think this is something that we really have to understand, because then we're really not connected to this body anymore. It's really called absorption. We're in this deep blissful state of being one with the divine. And even though this might not be your goal or my goal or anyone's goal these days anymore, or at least not so many in the West, we can experience these, I call them everyday Samadhi states, these states of realization that we are more than what we think we are. And so this is what we're wanting to talk about in this last part of this course. How to get these higher states of consciousness into our everyday life, because this is actually what we want. We want to have a happier and a healthier life. We want to experience personal and spiritual growth, and these concepts, this ultimate goal of yoga, sometimes can seem very abstract if we're still in the beginning of our yoga practice. And then there are two very important aspects that we have to focus here, mentioned also in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It's the concept of abhyasa and vairagya, which is basically a disciplined practice and the detachment from our personal worldly desires. So with our disciplined practice, we practice our shatkriya, the cleansing, we focus on our diet, we focus on relaxation, we focus on our meditation, on our pranayama and our asana practice. Be disciplined with these tools that help us to disconnect from our ego self and go deeper into the deeper layers of ourselves. And then ultimately use this to practice detachment from this worldly life. It doesn't mean that you have to go and live in a cave. It means that you should not make your internal state dependent on the outside factors. To make the voice within your head understand, or at least detach yourself from this voice, because this voice is always trying to make the outside world to solve your inside problems. So you want to change something from the outside based on a feeling that you have on the inside. This is what your ego, the voice in your head, is trying to do. But this will never work. You will never be able to change the outside circumstances in such a way that you will feel happiness and fulfillment within. So by using your practices and detaching yourself from this voice and detaching from these worldly things, we're able to then become spiritual. Because being worldly does not mean having status or fame. It's trying to look for the solution for your problems outside in the world. And being spiritual means to understand that the solution to your problems lie within, in yourself. And so this is what we're then trying to do with abhyasa and vairagya, to really have this disciplined practice and to detach ourselves more and more from this worldly pursuit of happiness.